All right, let's get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome. I've been told people, as I said earlier, for those that joined right at 11, people will continue to trickle in, but it looks like we have enough to field the team, so we can get started. So I'm really happy to be here today. What an amazing event the Ascent Virtual Conference has been this year. Just so much going on, it's hard to take it all in, and certainly can't make it to everything. What I want to talk about today is a framework that I'm using called Up and to the Right. And I came upon this because sort of whether you're with a startup, as I know many of you are, or with long-established company, you might be experiencing sort of what I think of as a disturbing problem, at least it is with my clients. And that is you sort of make big promises to the marketplace, but things aren't quite working the way that they could. You're producing as much as you can be producing, but it's harder than you thought. Maybe you're working far too hard, your teams are working too hard, and it's not always clear what's causing the bottlenecks, other than a lot of demand in some cases. But it really all boils down to one word, and that's execution. And you're not able to execute up to what you see as your capabilities. And I lived through this. I was an early employee 104 at Compaq Computer, which some of you may remember. Compaq was, at the time, the fastest growing company in American history. We went from no revenue to $111 million in our first year, and fastest to $1 billion of its time. And by the time I left 14 years later, we were at $15 billion. And it had gone from 104 employees, which was my number, seemed like a lot at the time, to 17,000 by the time that I left. And I've spent now the last 2 decades helping leaders navigate hypergrowth. It really is all about creating these internal strategies to help support the external growth that you've created. And what tends to happen is we get stuck with sort of a lot of blind spots about what can be and how things need to get done. We might get into a place where there's so much to do that it's sort of ready, fire, aim. We see a lot of that where it's just action, action, action. Or maybe we have the best of intentions, but we don't seem to be able to quite follow through. And we'll talk about each of those in its own way today. So if you want to continue this conversation afterwards, I'll post this again at the end, but I know we have a hard stop at 25 after the hour. This is how to contact me. You can join my community on any social media account at Karen Walker US, or my website, certainly just karenwalker.us. So let's talk about why this is an important topic at all, right? Why do we care about scaling? Why do we care about going up and to the right? Well, it's basically just because there's no such thing as a steady state. That's the engineer in me coming out, but I remember clearly from engineering classes, no such thing as a steady state. I'm like, what does that mean in business? Well, what it means is that even if you think things are stable, you think things are the same, and maybe for a moment they are for you, they're not a steady state in the rest of the world. Your customers are changing. Right? Their needs are changing. Sometimes their personnel are changing, right? Your market conditions are changing. And as we've seen in the last several months, the world around us changes quite a lot. Maybe not always quite so dramatically, but definitely there can be a change. And so even though it looks like things are stable, I would say that's a moment to catch your breath and prepare for the next round. Because the one thing we know about anything that looks like a steady state is that it's a brief precursor to either growth or decline. And we'd like to stay on the growth end of that. And I'll just encourage you as I go through, I'd love for this to be a little workshop-y, so please make comments, unmute yourself. Love to see you in the chat, or raise your hand and I'll try to respond as best as I can. Yeah. So I have sort of 3 pillars to this idea of no dumbing down and up and to the right. So the first is this awareness, right? That you have to have awareness that things can be different than they are, that you're not just stuck on this hamster wheel doing things the way you've always done them. But beyond that, you need to understand that they must be different. And then we have to have action. You have to have a bias for action in your organization, right? We often see this in sort of old state organizations, right? Where it takes a long time to get things done. You have to have a bias for action for getting things done. And then lastly, you have to have a system of accountability in your organization. And I fervently believe that it needs to be both mutual, i.e. it's not just you being accountable to your boss, and that it has to be based on outcomes. So not just what did you get done, but what's the impact or the effect of what you did. Yeah. So we'll start by just talking a few minutes here about awareness. So awareness, as I said, has these three main pillars. So this idea that you have to believe, and I'll say also your teams have to believe, that things can be different and that they need to be different. And this is important because you won't make any changes unless you believe that they're in your best self-interest, right? We all know sort of the change curve, right? Where you have a change comes, you first deny that it's going to impact you at all, and then you have some resistance that maybe it'll just pass over you if you don't pay attention. And then we explore change, and then eventually we get to commitment about the change. Well, you want to help yourself, because we all go through this curve, as well as your team, start that exploration as quickly as possible. And the only way to do that is to help people understand that these things are in their best self-interest to explore and to maybe make some change about. And so how do you go about doing that? Well, I'd say both for yourself and for teams and organizations that you're leading, you have to help them understand that something is good for you, also good for your community. And that community is often your clients, or it's the team and the organization that you're working with. Because that gives a little extra motivation to not just, does it need to be better for you, but better for everyone else as well. I think it's one of the biggest obstacles to getting people to move into doing something differently is this clear understanding that things really need to be different. The other thing that comes up here is, well, we've been successful so far, why do we need to change, right? And that's easy to understand, right? You've got perhaps double-digit growth rates. Why wouldn't you just keep doing things the way that you had been doing them? Well, that goes back to this idea of steady state, the status quo being a myth. And so the more you can help your teams understand this, the better off that you'll be. You can also help your organization understand, what does this mean to me, right? What does, whatever it is, this growth that's going on, how does this impact me? How does it impact my job? What do I need to be doing differently in order to be able to impact the success of this organization? You can also help people by addressing any fears that they might have about the change that's going on. For some people, it's really easy to impact change and to accept it. Maybe we've had in the past a really good experience with change. When I'm doing workshops with people, I often ask them, just think for a minute about sort of what's the best change that you've experienced and what made that a good change, right? And I hear back from people things like, wow, you know, I could really see the benefit that was going to accrue to me. It was so big that it outweighed any of the concerns that I might have had. Or maybe I just forgot to even look at the concerns. And then other times when I say, so think about sort of the worst changes you've ever been through, it's always that I didn't have enough information, I didn't understand what it meant, I could only see that it was going to change something that was good, and there was a lot of risk for downside. And so you have to really work with your organizations to help them see the positive impacts of the change while acknowledging anything that might be negative. And then the third part of this pillar is you believe that there's value in differing goals, methods, and needs of other people. So this one can be really hard because a lot of us who are leaders in organizations got to be that way because we're good at doing things. And we're good at doing things one way, and that's been, it's worked for us. And when it takes time, it slows us down in some ways to try to understand what are the needs of other people, what are their goals. Or maybe we share needs and goals, but they just do things differently than we do and doesn't seem as efficient somehow. But we know that if we only see things one way and we only experience things one way and we only do things one way, while there is some efficiency to that, it also provides us with really big blind spots. And so I think you have to have, and your teams have to have awareness that a single vision, a single way, a single methodology will give you a big blind spot and can be a hurdle to doing things that are scalable and repeatable going forward. And so what you really want to do is take time, and I will say frequently, we'll talk more about this later, to explore, right, particularly maybe you're chartering a team, what are the needs, goals, and values of other people, so that all of that can be taken into account as you plot your way forward. And I think expanding your awareness in that way will definitely help you as you begin to try to grow your organizations and to scale up and to the right. So just before I move on to the next, I would again encourage you to give me any comments or questions that you have in the chat. I'm happy to answer those. I think an example that I could use here is to talk about something I call the SOP continuum. And this is sort of seat of the pants to standard operating procedure. So when an organization is trying to scale and grow and change, often we just react to things, right? And we do that in what I call a seat of the pants way, right? Just get it done however quickly you can get it done. But if you're going to grow your organization, if you're going to be able to get those multiples we've dreamed of, then you have to have some standard operating procedure in place. And what too often happens is we get caught on that end of the continuum. And we have standard operating procedures for things that don't need them or that don't need them all the time. Or we have standard operating procedures for which there can't be exceptions. And I know if any of us have worked with big bureaucracies, you've been caught up in that. And so what you want is to be able to have the flexibility in your organizations that you can be at the right place on that continuum for the situation that you're in. And that if you are stuck in a place where you have too much procedure, that you are able to pull yourself out of that and react a little more quickly. And reversely, if you're in a place where you see you are solving the same problem again and again, you're able to put yourself into a standard operating procedure for your organization and then choose the right response. So I would say you can pay particular attention to that as you think about ways to expand awareness in your organization, that things can and must be different. Well, thank you, Catherine. I appreciate the positive comment. So we will move on now to talk about the second of these, which is to talk about action in our organizations. So action is a getting in front of the need for change, and it includes planning. It is about creating cross-functional alignment on outcomes, and it is about developing a bias for action tempered with a comfort with ambiguity. So as we think about action, this is, again, getting in front. It's not about just how quickly can I do something. I do believe that a bias for action is a competency that all organizations should pay attention to and in fact should hire for. But a bias for action overdone will become a weakness. It's sort of the old, what was this line? Ready, fire, aim, right? So you're just out doing things, but you're not sure they're in the right direction. So make sure that planning is rewarded in the organization and that you're also working together, that you have cross-functional alignment and outcomes. So often in organizations I see, even at the senior team level, where each function is out sort of optimizing for themselves. They're maximizing their efforts for their part of the organization, but they are not aligned. And so the organization has a lot of inefficiencies in it. And what you want to do is make sure that you have cross-functional alignment, and you can both, you can reach that in a meeting that you have, but the way that you keep it is by having outcomes that everyone agrees on that require cross-functional alignment so that people can really see the interdependencies between their organizations, and they understand at every level of the organization that if I'm successful but you're not successful, then we're not successful. We won't meet our goals. And by that, I don't mean that anyone should dumb down and work at less than their capability, but that everyone gets to work at their potential, but to do it in a way so that you're working on things that are aligned and that create the outcomes that the organization needs. And then lastly, to think about, in addition to this bias for outcome, temper with a comfort for ambiguity. And I think the comfort for ambiguity is the least used, most overlooked competency that's required in hypergrowth organizations. Because when you're in growth mode, almost everything is unknown, right? We make plans because we must. We make assumptions because we must. Because without those things, it's impossible to decide what steps to do next. But there is a lot of ambiguity behind all of that. There are so many moving parts in the world. And if you have a bias for action and you don't have comfort with ambiguity, oftentimes I see people who will just do something because it can be done, not because it should be done or because it should be done now. So people take action too fast. And by doing that, they miss significant information that will help them make a better decision, take a better action. And I'm not suggesting that you go slow and that you become a bureaucracy, right? We've all been stuck in those, in the mud, where it's impossible to get things done. But instead, that you be clear about when the action needs to be taken, and don't just take it because it's comfortable, right, to take it in this moment, or uncomfortable to leave an open item on your list. And that's hard, right? We all have so many things on lists. We just want to cross them off and move on. But it's not the best path forward. You'll be sort of longer and stronger in your careers if you develop this particular competency, which is a comfort with ambiguity. So any questions about that, please send them in. But my sum up for this is just to say no to just do it, right? Just do it sometimes is a good thing. If it's something that's not very impactful, that is reversible, as Amazon says in their statements. But most importantly, make sure you're taking action at the time that you need to. All right, the third pillar has to do with accountability. So we've created awareness about what needs to be different and why. People understand that. We have some action bias going in the organization, so we're getting things done. Hopefully we're doing that in a way that's aligned. And then we have accountability, i.e., did we get the things done that we wanted to get done and that we said we'd get done? So this is the one Achilles heel for most organizations. And if you remember the story of Achilles and his heel, right, he was pretty much bulletproof, or in his day, arrow-proof, except for this one spot on his heel where he'd been held when he was sort of dipped into the substance that gave him his amazing power. And that heel was small, but it was the thing that eventually brought him down. And I would say the same thing for your accountability processes. You must have disciplined debrief built into your organization. And by that, I don't just mean that you have a post-mortem at the end of a project, because after all, no one died. At least we hope not in our organizations. What we're trying to do is to get debrief instilled so that it is just part of everyday life. That it is part of every project, every meeting that you have, to say, what went well, what could have gone better, what did I do well, what could I have done differently that would have made it better. And that will really lower the level of defensiveness, but also help hold you accountable. And then this idea of mutual accountability, which is that it's stronger when the group is helping to hold the group accountable rather than just each individual holding him or herself accountable. And so I created this 4x4, which really looks at self-accountability versus other accountability. So self-accountability is just me saying, I want to get this thing done. I'm putting it on my list. It's going to happen. Other accountability is other people having a process in place to hold me accountable, but also typically that I have publicly said that I will. And so these 4 quadrants I'll go through fairly quickly. The first is fragile. So I'm just holding myself accountable. That often works. I wouldn't be a successful person without it. But I have so many other things to do that I can get distracted or pulled onto other projects, and that can make that accountability really decrease. If no one's holding us accountable, of course we flounder. We will never get back to that thing if there's no accountability for it. The upper left-hand quadrant, which is a place I think of as fearful, is where other people are holding me accountable, and I'm only doing things because of that. So in the United States, we have an Internal Revenue Service, right? They're going to come down on me if I don't get my taxes done, and so I do them. But that's the only reason. It is out of fear of consequence. But where the place we really want to be is over here up and to the right in the flourish quadrant. So that is both self and other holding accountable. So there's a process in place where I know that I will be held accountable and others know that I am holding myself accountable. And that's the spot where we have the best opportunity of actually getting the thing done. And in this place, it's all right to talk about mistakes. It's all right to talk about what I didn't do that I wish I had done, because everyone else is doing that too. There is mutual accountability and mutual lack of defensiveness, right? So the big takeaways here are, one, focus on outcomes. That's one way to ensure that there is alignment and that you're actually getting the things done that need to be done. Secondly, find ways to increase awareness of your organization of the need to change on whatever it is that you need to change, but also the constant need for change, right? There is no steady state. Make sure that you hone your conflict skills. And I mention this because at any time we're growing and changing, we have a lot of interaction with other people. And the normal part of interaction is to have conflict. And if you can deal with conflict in the correct way, and there are many different ways, but to know what those options are, choose the right one and resolve those conflicts while they're small, your organization will have a much better chance of really having repeatable, scalable growth. And then cultivate this bias for action with the comfort for ambiguity. And lastly, creating a culture of mutual accountability. So I'll stop here. I think we have time for one or two questions if anyone wants to pop in with something quickly. Yes. Just the bias for action is very much like playing whack-a-mole, if anyone remembers that game, or maybe you've seen it on a TV show where you just run around doing whatever is in front of you in the next moment, but it's not really making progress on anything. All right, well, thank you so much. I know our time is up. I do have a takeaway if anyone wants more on the Up and to the Right framework, which you can get at my website, KarenWalker.us. You can click on resources up and to the right. There's a download. And again, please join my community at Karen Walker US on any social media platform. Thank you so very much. Yes, I can put that link right here into the chat. Sorry, I have lost my PowerPoint there. Let's go back. So there's the website, and then it is I think the best thing to do is to go to the website and just click on resources, and you'll see something that says Up and to the Right. You can click right on that. Thank you for attending, and hope you found this helpful, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Take good care.